So starting off this list, and at number 10 with snakes in your toilet. This is a pretty popular urban legend because so many people have a fear of snakes. But what if I told you that this has actually happened? A family discovered that they had a rattlesnake in their toilet when their son went to the bathroom. This is a true story. Talk about scarring a child for life. But to top it all off, the family discovered that they had another 13 rattlesnakes living underneath their house. I mean, no. Just no.
Moving on to number 9, we have the kisses. Who here remembers kisses? Not the chocolate and not the, like the brightly colored beads. They were pretty popular in the late 80s to early 90s, especially in the Philippines. Now, in the Philippines, there was a legend that you could make these beads reproduce. Creepy, I know. Legend goes that if you put the beads in cotton and soak them in alcohol or water, then they would multiply and give birth to more kisses. In our 8th spot, we have the bridges. Here is another pretty popular urban legend from the Philippines. Legend states that bridges were made stronger if they use dead bodies in the construction. As a result, a lot of people believe that bodies were being cemented into the foundation of bridges. The legend continues by saying that bridge builders were collecting dead bodies for these bridges. And throughout the 90s, there were a lot of disappearances, which fueled this urban legend even more. Making our way down the list at number 7, we have HOMEY the Clown. Clowns are creepy enough on their own, so why do people have to go out and create terrifying urban legends about them? Well, in Chicago in the 90s, there was a legend going around of a creepy man stalking people trying to kidnap them. This man was dressed up as HOMEY the Clown from the TV show In Living Color. Some say he will try to lure you into his van with candy, while others believe that he was a serial killer or a maniac on the loose. A lot of people believe this legend to be true. However, there was no hard evidence proving it. Just a lot of supposed sightings. Moving on to number 6, we have the mind control. Disneyland is a magical place. You got fun rides, amazing sights, and cute mascot characters. But what if I told you that Disneyland was mind controlling its guests? That was a legend that was being spread all throughout the 90s into the 2000s. So apparently Disneyland is pumping out a certain fume throughout the park that makes you feel super happy. This scent basically triggers the release of endorphins in your brain, which is what makes everyone love Disney and keeps them coming back. Now, this is somewhat true. Disneyland has a device known as the Smeltzer, which can control what you smell. This device that is disguised by looking like a speaker is a scent generator that makes sure you smell exactly what they want you to smell. In the main entrance, it's said that you will smell popcorn. At the Pirates of the Caribbean ride, it will smell like wet wood and sea salt. And in candy shops or ice cream parlors, you will smell vanilla. Very sneaky, Disney. Very sneaky. We are now at our 5th and halfway mark with the sacrifice. Here is another popular urban legend from the Philippines. In the 90s, it was well believed that if you left your slippers outside of your house at night, then a cult member would kill you. Sounds ridiculous, but this legend made kids paranoid. Now, there are a bunch of different versions of this legend, but the general idea is that if you leave your flip-flops, sandals, shoes, or any footwear outside your door, a cult member will kill you. Apparently, those members do some weird chant over the footwear, like a spell, which will make the owner open the door to their house and let them in. When inside, you will suffer a very unfortunate fate. Other versions say that they will behead the owner and then bring the head with them. Whereas some believe that these individuals are Satanists and they do this as a sacrifice for the devil. Either way, this is a pretty creepy legend. Coming in at number 4, we have the 100 Steps Cemetery. The 100 Steps Cemetery is located in Indiana and is said to be very deadly. Now, no one really knows when or how this legend began, but it became pretty popular in the 90s. So legend goes that if you are in this cemetery at midnight, then you must climb the steps and count to 100. When you reach the top, you will be greeted by the ghost of an undertaker. This ghost will give you the vision of your death. On the way back down, you're supposed to count the steps again. If you count the same number of steps on the way down, then the vision is real and that's how you're gonna die. Whereas if you count a different number on the way down, then the vision is false. People that try to outsmart the cemetery by, let's say, climbing to the top of the hill without using the stairs will be severely punished. There are reports of people being knocked out or shoved by an unseen force. Some people have even had a large red handprint remain on their back for days. That is said to be the mark of the devil. Moving on at number 3, we have tap tap tap. This is a pretty popular urban legend that probably dates back before the 90s, but was very popular throughout the 90s. So according to this legend, a couple head out to the woods in their car to have a little fun time. However, while in the woods, their car won't start. So the boyfriend leaves to go look for some help. The girl remains in the car with the doors locked, waiting for her boyfriend to return. After hours, she begins to worry. She's alone in the dark in the car and she keeps hearing this tapping noise. For hours, something was going tap 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 on her roof. Eventually, she falls asleep and in the morning, she is greeted by the sheriff. He escorts her out of the car and that's when she sees her boyfriend hanging from a tree over the car, dead. The tapping noise she heard all night? That was the sound of his feet hitting the roof of the car below. Okay, that one is pretty terrifying. In our second spot, we have the black-eyed children. This legend is definitely one to keep you up at night. I've talked about it on this channel before, but for those of you who don't know, this legend is about evil children whose eyes are completely black. The kids can be anywhere from 6 to 16 years old and target adults who are alone, but they aren't actually children. Although they look like them, they are said to be some sort of creature that takes form as a child. These kids often ask for favors, such as asking to get a ride home with them, asking for food, or to use the bathroom in their house. But it's said that once you let them in, they will commit acts of extreme violence. Now, there are too many stories about people encountering these children. 1998 was said to be the first encounter. A man claims that 2 black-eyed children tried to get a drive home from him. That report is what caused the legend of the black-eyed children to become popular in the late 90s. And in our number 1 spot, we have the CHUPACABRA. The CHUPACABRA is a legend about a creature that likes to attack animals and consume their blood. CHUPACABRAs were first reported in 1995 in Puerto Rico, where they were blamed for attacks on goats, sheep, and other domestic animals. These animals were found uneaten, but just drained of blood, as if they were attacked by a vampire. The monster is said to be able to stand upright and resembles a large reptilian kangaroo with huge red eyes. Other people have said that the monster looks like a canine in appearance, but is hairless. Now, there are also sightings of the Chupacabra around the southwest as well, but people all over the world have now said that they have also found their livestock dead, with 2 puncture wounds and being drained of blood. So watch out, because this creature may actually be real.
Starting off at number 10 now, we have the corpse train. Now, according to London folklore, in the early 1900s there was a train that ran underneath the city and it was only for dead people. Back then, London's hospitals and morgues were struggling to deal with the vast amount of people that were dying from poverty and disease. They decided to transport the bodies out of the city, but knew that they couldn't do it overground without disturbing a lot of people. So they used an existing train line to load the bodies onto. The train ran just the other side of a wall from the normal daily service, where unsuspecting Londoners were getting on and off their trains unaware of the nearby bodies.
Now, in at number 9, we have an earwig eating your brain. Well, we've all heard this one before. We all thought, nah, that can't happen. Well, someone went to bed only to wake up by feeling a terrible headache, pain, and scratching noises coming within their head. Something is eating their brain. After this person went to the hospital, doctors determined that bugs have gone into his head through his ear canal and are now feasting on his brain. Well, unfortunately, this isn't entirely impossible. Back in 2013, after a woman took a vacation in Peru, she was experiencing headaches, facial pains, and air discharge. As it turns out, she had flesh-eating worms that burrowed into her head. Making its way into number 8, we have a weird-smelling hotel room. Okay, this one is definitely true, but the urban legend goes beyond a poorly cleaned room. According to this legend, a couple checks into a Las Vegas hotel and smell a foul odor. Upon investigating the smell, they discovered the body of a rotting dead girl stuffed into a box spring of their mattress. And according to NBC, this urban legend happened in real life. Back in 2010, a missing woman from Tennessee was found dead with her body stuffed into the bed frame within a hotel, and a serial killer poisoned a man, strangled him, and then stuffed his body into a mattress in a hotel in New Jersey. So this urban legend is very true, and it's just happening around the world in hotel rooms. People are killing people and just stuffing them in mattresses. I mean, what the heck is going on? Okay, so the deadly elevator comes into this list at number 7. I think we all have a fear sometimes of, an elevator elevator closing on someone's limb. You're walking in and then, oh my god, my arm never got in, and it just shuts on it. But then again, we're all calmed by the fact that elevators have sensors. Well, do the older ones also have sensors? Because I'm a little bit afraid of like old elevators. There are safety precautions, but as it turns out, a doctor was a victim of an elevator death. In 2003, the doctor became pinned between the door at the shoulders as he was getting onto the elevator. The elevator began to ascend. It ended up slicing his head into two, leaving his ear and jaw dangling from his body. Not to get too graphic, what the heck. Apparently 30 people have been killed each year by an elevator. The chef who cooked his own wife makes its way into this list at number 6. There's an urban legend surrounding a chef who killed and slow cooked his wife because they were constantly fighting. So when you have an argument, you know, this is what you do. What? Okay, well this urban legend is actually something that happened. A man murdered his wife because they were arguing over drugs and money. In order to hide the body, he decided to take it into his restaurant, and he put her into an industrial sized slow cooker and then cooked her for 4 days. Because, you know, 1 day is not enough, 2 days, you know, 4 days is just perfect. Hannibal Lecter would be so proud and hungry for some of that wife soup, special of the day, wife soup. And imagine being at the restaurant, it's like, it says wife soup. Well, what's up with the name? And then the restaurant owner's like, oh, she had a pretty big part in it. Okay, moving into number 5, with the Halloween stunt gone horribly wrong. According to this urban legend, a teenager attempts to fool people by pretending to hang himself, but instead, he accidentally hangs himself and everyone watching thinks it's all an act. He's just gonna wake up all of a sudden and be like, I tricked you guys. But sadly, this actually happened in real life. When a working gallows was built for a Halloween show, it was supposed to be rigged so that the victim was secured by a harness and he would stop just before being hung. Unfortunately, it malfunctioned and the person died. Trapped in the Morgue comes in at number 4. This one would freak me out. This is an urban legend that talks about people being pronounced dead when they're actually just unconscious in a coffin in a morgue about to be buried or maybe lit on fire if you're being cremated. So these people who are actually unconscious, they later wake up in the morgue, but they are slowly freezing to death. There's nothing that they can do about it. Well, this legend turns out to be true. In 2011, an 80-year-old woman was declared dead due to a cardiac arrest, and she was placed in a body bag and put into the morgue. Later on, the funeral home came to pick up the body, only to discover that her body bag was partially unzipped and she was covered in cuts and bruises. As it turns out, she was only unconscious when she was declared dead, and she ended up slowly freezing to death as she desperately attempted to free herself. I mean, this is a big mess up. Stabbing its way into number 3 is the Craigslist Killer. There was countless urban legends surrounding the dangers of Craigslist. A lot of them were about people being lured by men and being killed in abandoned houses. Well, sadly, this is also true, but you guys knew that because you know the title of this video. In 2009, a medical student arranged meetings for sexual favors on Craigslist with women where he would brutally murder them by close range shooting or bludgeon them to death. Thankfully, police caught this guy and arrested him, but in prison, he committed suicide by cutting major arteries and blocking his airway. Now, in at number 2 is the intruder living in the walls. There is an urban legend about a family who moved into a secluded older home and is disturbed to find out that objects are continuously being misplaced and there are strange noises happening. Eventually, the town discovers that the family has been brutally murdered and the attacker has been living in their walls. Well, as it turns out, there are a number of true cases of an invader living in the attic or walls of a family home without them even knowing. In 2015, a man entered someone's home, crawled underneath their bed where he remained there for 3 days. This is why you guys should check your bed before you go to bed. Finally, Oregon Thieves comes into this list at number 1. This urban legend is about tourists who were unknowingly drugged and robbed of their healthy organs. You just wake up, there's like a huge stitch in the middle of your body and you're just wondering, oh my god, what the heck happened? Well, once these people are awake and they find themselves in a bathtub full of ice with a note that basically tells them that they need to go to the hospital immediately if they want to live. Well, as it turns out, this could be more than just an urban legend. There was a real life incident that ABC covered back in 2008 about 3 Indian men who were lured into a hospital, held at gunpoint, and they were put under. They woke up in excruciating pain and they woke up with a couple less organs. Extracting organs and selling them on the black market is unfortunately very real and very lucrative.
Starting off this countdown, we have the Cabbage Patch dolls. Those creepy little baby powder smelling dolls have a bunch of urban legends of their own, but one that really scared children in the 90s was this one. So legend goes that Cabbage Patch dolls were designed to resemble what people would look like after a nuclear attack. According to this legend, back in the late 80s, President Reagan and the Cabbage Patch Dolls company decided to make the dolls intentionally odd looking. They did this because scientists believed that the dolls were what the offspring of survivors of a nuclear war would look like. These dolls were then a way for people to get accustomed to this look, so that people weren't ostracized for their appearance. That's terrifying. I can never look at those dolls the same way again.
Next up at number 9 now, we have the suicide pool. This one comes from Epping Forest near Essex. The story goes that years ago, a young couple in love were followed to a pond in the forest by the girl's father. When the couple finally embraced, the father leapt from the trees to confront the boy. The fight got out of hand and the father ended up killing the boy in a rage at the edge of the pool. The waters then turned black. Wildlife that was touching the water died instantly. In the years that followed, bodies started to appear in the water. First it was an old woman, then a young one with her young child beside her. They say the pool drew them into their death and that the pool is still out there in the forest somewhere waiting for its next victim. Next up at number 8 now, we have Annie. This one comes from Edinburgh, Scotland. In the old town there lies a street known as Mary King's Close. It's steeped in myths and legends of hauntings and murders. In 1990, a psychic called Aiko Gibo visited and felt a small hand touch hers. She said that she then made contact with the spirit of a dead child called Annie who had died in a plague hundreds of years ago and had lost her doll. The psychic then went to a nearby shop and brought back a Barbie doll for her. Now since then, visitors leave dolls for Annie and a mountain of them has built up in the dark. Moving on to number 7 now, we have the Faceless Woman. This one comes from the borough of Barking in London. There you can find Beacon Tree Station, home to the Faceless Woman. The most famous sighting of her happened in 1992. A station supervisor reported that on one night he heard the handle of his office door rattle. Outside on the platform stood a woman. She had blonde hair, she wore a very pale dress and just stared into the distance. The supervisor approached her, but as he reached out, she turned to him only to reveal she had no face, just darkness where there should be one. Local ghost hunters claim that she is the victim of a train crash that happened there in 1958 which killed 10 people. At number 6 now, we have the Beast. England's Hackney Marshes is known for its sprawling woodland and boggy reed marshes often covered in swirling fog, the perfect setting for this urban legend. The story goes that in 1980, 2 bear carcasses were found in the river. They had been decapitated. People started speculating about who or what could cut a bear's head clean off its shoulders. Then a year later, 4 boys were taking a walk along the marsh one winter morning when they saw it through the trees. They described it as a giant, great, growling, hairy thing. As soon as it saw them, it reared up on its back legs and let out a deafening roar. The boys ran, but the story remains always in the back of people's minds as they trudge through the marsh. We're returning now to the London Underground for our number 5 with The Crying Girl. On November 18th, 1987, a match was dropped on an escalator at London's King Cross station. A fire quickly spread into the nearby ticket office, which resulted in the death of 31 people. In the years since then, passengers have reported seeing a girl who died around the station. She has long brown hair, wears jeans and a t-shirt, and is always crying. Some people have even reported hearing her sobs while smelling smoke coming out from the escalators. Back to Scotland now for our number 4 with Sawney Bean. This is the gruesome tale of Alexander Sawney Bean, a man who was said to be the head of a Scottish clan of cannibals in medieval times. According to legend, the group was made up of his wife, their 14 children and 32 grandchildren, some of whom were born through incest. They lived in a cave by the water and would ambush people on the road at night. They would bring their bodies back to the cave to then dismember and eat them. Any leftovers were pickled in a jar for later. When King James VI of Scotland eventually heard of these murders, he led a manhunt to capture them. The clan was caught and then executed. Some people say you can still find the cave along the Benane Head area of Scotland. Moving on to number 3 now, we have Cane Hill. Some say this is one of the most haunted places in England. It was a mental asylum for over 100 years from 1882 to 1991. It built up a reputation for abandoning some of its patients, hiding them away from the public eye and never truly helping them. Some people say the patients who died left their energy behind there because of their tortured lives. The building was gutted by a mysterious fire in 2010. Perhaps the scariest stories of all are of the faces appearing by the burnt out windows. Next up at number 2 now, we have the House of the Screaming Skull. This one comes from Bettiscombe Manor in Dorset, England. The legend goes that in 1830, a man lived there called John Frederick Pinney. He had a slave that he had brought back from the Caribbean island of Nevis. The man became ill and on his deathbed he swore he would never rest unless his body was returned home to Nevis. Pinney refused to pay for that expense, and when he died he had the man buried in the local graveyard. After that, ill fortune began to plague the village for months. Screams and cries were heard from the cemetery. At the manor house, windows rattled and doors kept slamming. The body was dug up and brought to the manor house, where today only the skull remains, where it's said to haunt the manor, but the village remains safe. And finally, at number 1 now, we have the Hellhounds. Dartmoor is a vast, rocky, windy and mysterious part of England. It's popular among tourists, but everyone who goes there is aware of the legend of the Hellhounds. It's said that a pack of these ghost dogs wanders the moors at night, preying on sheep, and they're not afraid of humans. They've often been described as cat-like, but with the frame of a bear, and very fast. There have been pictures and film taken of them over the years that claim to show glimpses of these Hellhounds in action. Many of the locals don't even need that though. They've heard the stories handed down from generation to generation. Some of them even say they've seen the hounds with their own 2 eyes.